We got here. History.
Reduce population and gain control of the planet. So Hitler was British. The Germans and the British were the same. That's why when you do the research, you find out that American corporations were building Hitler's Wehrmacht.
Yeah.
Ford Motor Company, I had a college class on this in 1993. Ford, and I would be scored on whether I was right based on answering this question. Ford Motor Company built Hitler's tanks with tank plants in Germany, and when the Allied bombers blew up the Ford tank plants, Ford personally repaid Hitler to rebuild them as fast as possible. I had another class that started the same year, and in that class, my professor said that Boeing had built Hitler's bombers in America, starting them out as commercial airliners. Then they were shipped to South America, where they took the seats out. Then they were shipped over to Africa, where they were repainted as Hitler's bombers and given the right tools, and then sent right in.
Hello.
The whole thing was a big con. It required, the power of the German army required the U.S. Germany was not industrial enough on its own. We had a much more large amount of land and much more industrial power to do this for them. But then the legitimate people in the military were actually fighting against the Germans and won that war. So it's a very complex story. 1952, as I said, the Germans overflew the capital. A secret deal was reached where they agreed to join the German secret space program. And this is all becoming a matter of documented history now. We've gotten it from Pete Peterson, we've gotten it from Corey Goode, we've gotten it from William Tompkins, other insiders as well. So the pieces are now fitting together very nicely. With this in mind, the U.S. starts to go deep black. And by the time Eisenhower got into office, the President of the United States was no longer on a need-to-know basis. And so one of the people we see at all of these events, Richard Dolan, let's give him a big round of applause, everybody. Broke this incredible story where in 1958, Eisenhower tasked this man, who was actually a CIA agent. He never gave his name. This came out in 2013. And this man claimed that he was a CIA agent who actually was hired by Eisenhower to invade Area 51, to lead up that team. And here's Richard Dolan interviewing this whistleblower. So this is the quote from Eisenhower that we get from this whistleblower in that video. Eisenhower, the president, said, "We called the people in from Majestic 12, from Area 51 and S4, but they told us," meaning Area 51 and these Majestic 12 people told us, that the U.S. government had no jurisdiction over what they were doing. What? Well, you all know this, but I mean, for some people, they're totally mind-blown right now. You guys are a very educated audience. Eisenhower says, "I want you and your boss to fly out there. I want you to give them a personal message from me." This is new history that we have. "I want you to," and you can see he's just shaking with rage as he says this, right, with his finger quaking and everything. "I want you to tell them, whoever's in charge, that they have this coming week to get into Washington and to report to me. And if they don't, I'm going to get the 1st Army from Colorado. We are going to go over and take the base over." This is crazy. You're literally seeing a massive invasion force. The 1st Army obviously would have been a very large invading force to actually invade and take over Area 51. And he was really serious. He said, "I don't care what kind of classified material you've got, we are going to rip this thing apart." So what ended up happening was that there was a meeting. These people did meet with Eisenhower, these Majestic 12 people, and they were willing to grant him and his inspectors a visit. Now, our CIA agent guy was not in charge. He had a commanding officer, and the commanding officer and the agent and a few others got to go on a tour of Area 51, where they saw several large hangars that had big garage-style doors with flying saucers inside. So they got to see that. The agent's boss got to partially interview a gray extraterrestrial that was being held in captivity. So this is pretty amazing stuff. But at the same time, it was sort of like a slap on the wrist. They got to get away with just showing them a little tease. Nothing really happens. So Eisenhower warned in his closing address, which all of us know that one, the rise of unwarranted power and influence by the military-industrial complex. This secret combination exists and will persist until we rise to oppose it. So Kennedy, of course, inherits the presidency from Eisenhower and gets this massive briefing about what's really going on. And he starts to try to pass Executive Order 11110, did pass it, which prevented the sale of silver from the U.S. Treasury. Now, why is that important? Because the U.S. Treasury was getting rid of all of its silver, and that was the only collateral that we had to make a Treasury dollar, backed by silver. So the first thing Kennedy did was to stop them selling the silver off so that they would have enough left to make a non-Federal Reserve dollar. And he was secretly working with the alliance, with these people, to try to get the truth about UFOs, the same people that invaded Area 51, the same military that said, F that, we don't want to be left out of this thing. They were advising Kennedy. Kennedy started to work with them. Kennedy was also working to create a nuclear armistice with the Soviet Union, with Khrushchev. They were having talks about that. All of this is what led to him being assassinated. The next move that the alliance made, very interesting, a year later, almost immediately after, they rushed out this movie, 7 Days in May. And the movie is very interesting in historical context because the movie is about a government conspiracy to overthrow the U.S. So read this from Wikipedia. It says, 7 Days in May is a 1964 American political thriller motion picture about a military political cabal's planned takeover of the United States government in reaction to the president's negotiation of a disarmament treaty with the Soviet Union. That's Kennedy. They told you the truth through fiction. I'm suggesting this is a poster from the movie. I'm suggesting, Mr. President, there's a military plot to take over the government of the United States next Sunday. So this is basically the alliance, the military people telling you what's really going on here, showing you the truth disguised as fiction, which was obviously Kennedy trying to get a nuclear peace deal, and the overthrow was him being shot. Here's another picture from that movie, and it says right here again, the astounding story of an astounding military plot to take over these United States. This is the same director that a year before Kennedy was assassinated was already exposing the Nazi mind control techniques they were using to create these assassinations and fake terrorist attacks in the movie The Manchurian Candidate, where the whole point is that this man is going to shoot the President of the United States well under mind control. And in fact, that happens a year later. So they knew Kennedy was threatened with assassination. They put this movie out to tip people off. So it's the same guy that then does 7 Days in May afterwards. Very interesting. So in the meantime, the alliance is fighting for the truth, and this is the alliance that's in the political arena here on Earth. But they're not getting any breakthrough in the UFO embargo, and at the same time, the secret space program is having quantum leaps in technology, time travel. They're building better and better spaceships. They're dealing with more and more extraterrestrial races. So 1972, the Watergate scandal was the next opportunity that the alliance tried to use to really bring down the U.S. and to bring out the truth of what was going on, because presidents became complicit in the secrecy. They got a little bit of information about the secret space program, not very much, but they all agreed on keeping everything quiet. And Gerald Ford takes office. Nothing happens. The alliance is beaten back once again. Jimmy Carter goes into office. He tries to get UFOs to come out, but he's kept contained. And then the neocon Bush Sr. set this deal up with the Iranians saying, let us win, we'll give you a much better deal. Just hold on to the hostages until the election's over. But what happens is Reagan, very soon after becoming president, finds out that this truth of UFOs is being kept hidden from us. And on March 30th, 1981, they attempted to kill him. They meaning the deep state. The reason why was that Reagan, remember, was a Hollywood actor, and he'd played Wyatt Earp and Cowboys, all kinds of stuff. Another big Hollywood actor was Jackie Gleason, the infamous funny man, making a very funny face right here. You can see in this next picture, Jackie Gleason was friends with presidents. Here he is hanging out with Richard Nixon, goofing around. And Jackie Gleason leaked to the tabloids, because that's the only people that would listen, that he actually did go to a top secret Air Force base and saw bodies of dead extraterrestrials. And of course, oh, it's sensational, it's tabloid, it doesn't, no, this was true. So he tells this to Reagan, and Reagan wanted to come out with the truth, but he didn't understand how good the surveillance was. So during that terrible day, May 30th, 1981, this is right before they tried to shoot Reagan, one of the last pictures that was taken. And notice the guy that's immediately to Reagan's left with the bald head, not the soldier, but the guy with the bald head. That's James Brady. Through some kind of weird divine intervention, James Brady stumbled as the shot was fired, and he took the bullet in his head that was going to kill Ronald Reagan. And these are some photographs from immediately after Brady was shot. You can see the guy there holding his gun in the middle. This is right after it happened. That's Brady, you know, with his back facing us and his feet on the ground. That's where Brady fell. And Reagan is over up against the wall at the same time. This is another shot moments later, probably from the same cameraman. And you see everybody's now got their guns drawn already. Here's another shot of two different people on the ground, one of whom is Brady in the back. And then this is Brady getting closer up. And you can see there's a fallen post there, and there's a grate where he is. And then this is actually a color photo. He did live. He got shot in the head, but amazingly he lived. And so this is where the gun control bill came from. This is Ronald and Nancy with Brady giving their classic laugh, right? So look, Reagan knew that, and they told him that next time we won't miss. That bullet was made for you. Your friend Jackie Gleason might have told you something, but that's not any of your business. A year afterwards, he couldn't help but say something. And this is when Steven Spielberg made the movie E.T. And they had a private screening with many people from the White House all together at the White House, top military people. And Spielberg was invited there, and they did a private screening of E.T. And when Spielberg recently was promoting his movie Super 8 about another type of alien invasion, a negative one instead of a positive one, like E.T. was, this is what he actually said. This is a quote from Spielberg, and he's talking about Reagan. Reagan just stood up and he looked around the room almost like he was doing a head count. And he said, "I wanted to thank you for bringing E.T. to the White House. We really enjoyed your movie." Then he looks around the room again, very suspiciously, and says, "There are a number of people in this room who know that everything on that screen is absolutely true." That's about as far as he was willing to go to actually tell someone in the public eye what the heck is really going on here. So thanks to the fact that my insider, Dr. Pete Peterson, was working with the Reagan administration during this time, we found out that even Reagan was briefed on the arrival of a massive planet-sized spaceship that came into our solar system that they called the Seeker. It looked kind of like a soccer ball on the outside, had these massive round doors that opened up that were hundreds of miles wide with lots of little ships going around, coming out of them. And they were circling around the outer planets. They would go around Neptune, and they'd go around Uranus, and this is what was happening. So people were really freaked out. And the secret space program people, actually by this point in the 80s, remember, when Reagan gets into office, they pass all this secret legislation that funneled much more money into the secret space program, including the nuclear arms race, which was very, very expensive, and it was all fake, because the Soviets were in on it. The Soviets were also building the secret space program with us. So on the surface, in certain levels, they were fighting, but on the higher level, it's all part of a secret plan to generate enough money. And what they wanted to do was to have their own space platform to have a surprise attack against a real invasion. So the Seeker comes in, and the secret space program people told it to get lost, and basically they claimed they were just peaceful tourists and they left. I believe Reagan got revenge for them trying to kill him by turning against his own cabal level of the administration in the Iran-Contra scandal in 1987. And this, of course, led to the public revealing that the U.S. government was selling arms to an allegedly terrorist state in Iran, taking the money from that illegal, treasonous sale, and then arming the group that was protecting their cocaine business in South America, the Contras, which they call rebels or freedom fighters. But these people were just as awful as any other type of terrorist you can imagine, cutting people's tongues out, doing all kinds of outrageously crazy, evil stuff. So you find out that the U.S. government is claiming to be fighting terrorists when they're actually arming them, and they're claiming to be fighting the war on drugs. Just say no. And wait a minute, you guys are like arming the people that are protecting the cocaine plantations? What? But somehow it didn't bring down the United States government. The alliance didn't get what they wanted. The ET side moved in. This is another thing that we hear from insiders. In 1990 to 91, the entire arsenal of nuclear weapons in the US, the USSR, and anybody else who had them all melted down. Believe it or not. And I heard this from, yes. I heard this from Dr. Pete Peterson. I heard this from Bob Dean. I heard this from Jacob. I heard this from multiple insiders. And it was a very bizarre thing. So we don't have nuclear weapons anymore because the ETs will not allow us to have them. The only ones they, yes, that's true. What they did is they came up with a system that is actually tracking everybody with these satellites from the National Reconnaissance Office. And if you're inside your house, they know where you are by the heat signature. And what this satellite does is it can get about, each warhead can get, I think it's 30 or 60,000 people per second. And it shoots a laser beam through your medulla and just, you're dead instantaneously. And they have enough of these to get everybody. And that technology was finally leaked in the movie Captain America: The Winter Soldier.
Yes, I fucking knew that.
That's all they have. They don't have nuclear weapons.
I fucking knew that. I fucking knew that. I fucking thought of it and knew that. I was like that, and then on the cell phones they can track you on the cell phones too. That would be perfect with a weapon like that. And holy shit, I got goosebumps. Oh wow. I'm a fucking genius. So I bet the pyramid ones works like that. So gold at the apex, and then I guess it's transdimensional on the inside. Wow, that's cool.
Weapons, and believe me, the ETs are not going to let them use the laser stuff either. But the point is, we do not have any risk of global nuclear war. It cannot happen. It's absolutely true. So this would represent one of the ET alliance groups working.
Wow. Wow. That's insane. Wow.
To make sure that our planet will not be destroyed, because it's their lives too, and the law of free will allows them to protect their homeland from being destroyed, because they live in many cases in these honeycomb earth underground areas. So it's very important to understand, in the aftermath of the nukes melting down, the Soviet Union collapses, they give up, they're like, well, this whole nuclear war thing is fake, we can't keep this up anymore, we need to use our money to try to survive, so they just bow out entirely, because now they know it's not real. And then in the aftermath of that, we immediately get, oh, it's Iraq now, it's terrorists. 1991, Gulf War, all this kind of stuff. So they immediately switch gears. Nobody really even celebrates the fact the Soviet Union was defeated. Now we got to worry about Iraq. Now we got to worry about Afghanistan. And then the alliance tried to make another big attempt in 1995. It was actually before that. Almost as soon as Clinton took office in 1992, the alliance is trying to tear him down with the Whitewater investigation. You have to understand that Clinton and his wife Hillary were running a very elaborate cocaine business out of Mena, Arkansas. Yeah, it's not cool. And so, lock her up, right? That's what somebody just said. That's the real truth about Whitewater. It was the same damn thing as the Iran-Contra scandal that had only blown over 5 years before. The place that the cocaine was coming to was Mena, Arkansas. And there's a really cool movie with Tom Cruise. Whether you like him or not, you gotta see it, okay? Called American Made. Go watch that movie. It is the story of Mena, Arkansas. Yes, it's amazing. You've gotta see it. So the Whitewater thing was intended to bring down the whole cabal, folks. it was going to include that the U.S. government is trafficking in cocaine, that they're doing it with the power of what became the President of the United States and his wife, and this investigation was being run by the Alliance. Here's another headline from Time magazine showing how the President's own men were trying to hinder the Whitewater investigation. And believe it or not, Hillary Clinton, the only time in American history where a First Lady was subpoenaed in front of a congressional grand jury for testimony as a criminal. Right? So here's a slide about Whitewater, just so you can see some of the historical context here. It was named for a failed 1970s Arkansas real estate venture by Whitewater Development Corporation, in which Governor, later President Bill Clinton, and his wife were partners. They had accusations of impropriety, improper campaign contributions, political and financial favors, tax benefits. The Clintons were also accused of hiding files, which they claim to have lost. Just like how they had an unfortunate house fire recently, right? You saw that story. This is Hillary actually testifying in front of Congress, trying to cover her butt. And then, of course, as you all know, Vince Foster, who was one of her closest associates, was going to testify against her, and he suddenly decides to commit suicide. And so there were so many of these that they actually called it Arkanside. So this is the first hero I'd like to honor. This is Vince Foster here with Hillary. Yes. And he was shot, well, he apparently shot himself in 1993, or however it was that he committed suicide. Alleged suicide.
No.
So this made people really upset. Everybody that was going after the Clintons, everybody that was all involved in the Whitewater investigation, everybody that was going to testify, they all keep getting knocked off. And then we only hear a little bit of the story.
No, it was.
So I became aware of the work of Sherman Skolnick in 1996. He died in 2006, and he was this very brave man who actually would take on judges and get them arrested and thrown in prison, corrupt judges. And he was also an expert on airplane crash suicide attacks, right, where people have this allegedly accidental airplane crash, but it's intended to murder the people on board. And so this is him in 1973 talking about a jet crash during the time of Watergate, where that crash was used to sabotage part of the Watergate investigation. So again, this is what the cabal does. When people are going after them, they take you out, and not to dinner. They take your plane out.
Yeah. Just like
so this is one of the most incredible articles that really was a foundation stone for me in understanding the Alliance. Notice it is before 9/11. It's May 11th, 2001. Just one day after I saw the May 10th, 2001 briefing at the National Press Club with these people talking about the truth of UFOs with Dr. Stephen Greer, the Disclosure Project. So this was very, very exciting for me. This was a very exciting release. And what he was talking about here was the Oklahoma City bombings. And it's a very fascinating story, so check this out. So April 17th, 1995 is the key date. In the spring of 1995, a small group of highly patriotic flag officers were plotting to arrest their commander-in-chief Clinton for giving military secrets to the Red Chinese, a sworn enemy of the United States, an arrest that was provided for and authorized under the military code. So these flag officers were Alliance people, okay? And their goal was to try to stop the cabal, because what they do is they arm their apparent enemies, just like they did with the Iranians.
I bet it was the
so they were going to just jump right over Whitewater, but Whitewater documents actually had a lot of this stuff in there. There was a lot more to Whitewater than what we saw. It was like the Robert Mueller investigation, a different type of that, but the same kind of thing, and it dominated the headlines for years. Yeah.
No.
And then it says here, as titular head of both the U.S. civilian and military establishment, Clinton, on the other hand, could have arrested these 24 admirals and generals for mutiny. So that, I flagged that part in yellow. to show you that the number was 24. Now, not all these people traveled together, but unfortunately, a large number of them did travel at once. So, he could have arrested them for mutiny, but they wanted to blow the lid off of this whole thing. If they were not assassinated, they intended to defend themselves with proof, such as Clinton giving to the head of the Red Chinese secret police in the White House and elsewhere U.S.'s financial, industrial, and military secrets. They were going to have the proof. So that would have been the end of it. Just like with Watergate, they tried to make that the end of it. Just like with Iran-Contra. On Monday, April 17, 1995, a military jet plane load of these top military personnel, some of them, was en route to Dallas, Texas. They had on board what is not supposed to exist, an American prisoner of war prepared to finger the Pentagon, as perpetuated by Clinton, as continuing the POW missing in action cover-up from the Vietnam War. So they actually had a guy on this plane who was written off for dead as a POW. Oh, he's long gone. When in fact he had been there the whole time, still a prisoner, still being tortured, and the U.S. had completely ignored him because they really don't care. On the deeper level, this cabal stuff, they really don't care. So thanks to sabotage, the plane exploded in the air and killed all on board near Alexander City, Alabama. The Pentagon made every effort to cover up what happened. There are strong reasons to believe the plane had a portion of a group of 7 Days in May style military officers plotting a coup against the White House.
Truly is.
So this was really serious. This was the alliance, and you saw what 7 Days in May was. Now that movie, of course, was talking about the people that killed Kennedy, whereas this would have been a benevolent 7 Days in May kind of situation. So they all died in this fiery airplane crash. Thereafter, the small group of other flag officers who were now out of uniform hid in Paris, in the suburbs. A year later, the chief of naval operations, so this is like the head guy, right? The #1 guy in the Navy for naval operations, Admiral Jeremy Bourda, apparently aware of this planned coup and was planning it behind the scenes. He was assassinated, and it was covered up as a suicide, which is a favorite whitewash by the monopoly press. So let's give a moment of honor, a big round of applause for Admiral Jeremy Bourda.
Yeah.
And I'm serious in saying there are so many heroes that have been fighting for us in the Alliance that we will never know about. And he happened to be the guy who was coordinating this whole effort. So there was hardly any stories in the news about this crash. This one comes out in the New York Times. You can see by the font there. And this was the same day that it happened. All 8 aboard Air Force jet die in crash and landing attempt. An Air Force jet exploded and crashed today in a wooded area near a subdivision while trying to land at the airport in an eastern Alabama town. All 8 people on board were killed. And it says some names here, which we're going to get into in a second. Now, this is another one from the next day. 8 killed in crash of Air Force jet in Alabama. And this, again, mainstream media, they're talking about this. And it says, the other victims cannot be identified until identities are confirmed and relatives are notified. So they only named a few names. Then on April 18th, which again is the day after, it says, a probe begins in the Air Force jet crash. And this is from UPI. So this is the one we're going to read from now. Among those killed was Clark G. Feister, the Air Force Assistant Secretary for Acquisition. Feister, age 61, was a close friend of Defense Secretary William Perry and was responsible for Air Force research, development, and acquisition. Feister had 38 years of experience in designing and developing advanced intelligence, electronic countermeasures, and imagery systems. So this is a guy who is very aware of the most advanced types of surveillance. And so let's give a big round of applause for Clark Feister here, another brave soldier who did his part with Admiral Bourda, and he very likely was the guy who had built the surveillance systems that had caught the cabal red-handed with the information that they were going to release under the guise of the Whitewater investigation as this attempted coup. Also killed was Feister's military assistant, Air Force Colonel John Clark, Unfortunately, there's so many John Clarks, I can't find a picture of him online. And Major General Glenn Prophet II, a senior leader in the Air Force, who was the Director of Plans and Operations for Air Education and Training Command at Randolph. And let's give it up for Glenn Prophet II. It's so frustrating. They got so close. They got so close to pulling this off, but too many of them were in one plane at one time, and the plane got taken down. Prophet was a command pilot with more than 6,000 hours of flying experience. He began his Air Force career in 1965. He was responsible for developing and implementing operational plans, programs, and policies for undergraduate flight training, NATO jet pilot training, survival training, combat training for airlift tankers, and special operations, i.e. black ops crews. So you can do the math here. He's the guy that went in and got the POW out of Vietnam. Give him another round of applause. This is really serious stuff. So then it says the other victims were identified by the Air Force on Tuesday as Major Hubert Fisher, who was assigned to the Pentagon, and retired Air Force Major James Horn. So these were some of the other guys in the crew. The two-man flight crew, Captain Paul Carey, an Air Force instructor pilot, and First Lieutenant Paul Bowers, an aircraft commander, also died in the crash. They don't say anything about this other guy. The name of the 8th victim, a U.S. Army sergeant, was being withheld pending notification next of kin. That's the POW. They don't want to tell you who he is because it would blow the lid off of the thing. Air Force officials at the Pentagon declined to speculate as to the cause of the crash, but witnesses on the ground reported hearing at least 2 explosions as the plane flew over a busy highway near Alexander City and fell into the thick woods near a subdivision. Whoa, 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 hold on a minute. Eyewitnesses are hearing 2 explosions. That's not a typical plane crash. That's a bomb. It was either blown up from inside the plane or it was shot down. And these are top military people. Don't you think that there would have been this amazing wave of national indignation? Everybody's calling for an investigation. Everybody wants to know what the heck is going on because you got top military people clearly shot down in an airplane. There's some kind of conspiracy. It's like JFK all over again. But then we got a little bit distracted the day after we heard about this. The very next day after the names of the victims were released, they didn't even give it 24 hours. And what I heard from Pete Peterson was that all of the juiciest documents in the Whitewater investigation were being stored in the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City. So they took out the people that were doing the planning, and then they destroyed the cache of all the documents by actually blowing up the entire building. Now, if you weren't into all this back then, let me just share this with you real quick. The little bomb that Timothy McVeigh made in a frickin' van could not possibly have been strong enough to blow the shit out of this building all the way up to the top floor. This was a controlled demolition.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, they had planned on a much larger part of the building coming down, if not the entire building, collapsing into its own footprint, but several of the explosives failed. So the building remained standing, as you can see here. This was a dry run for 9/11. They wanted to test it out. They wanted to see, will we be able to get away with this with all of the funky problems and all of the kind of botched cover-up? And do you really think that this little bitty van with a little bomb in it would have done all this damage? It's impossible. First of all, the surface of the van itself would contain a lot of the explosion. And so it doesn't even make any sense. But you can see it right here that it was, I took this right off of Google, April 19th, 1995, just 2 days after the plane crash. Do you think anybody's thinking about that plane crash after Oklahoma City? No. The Whitewater investigation grinded on for a few more years, and Clinton actually ends up getting impeached over other things. The alliance just hit him the whole time he was in office, but it never really worked. 6 years, and so all the key documents were lost, by the way, in this bombing, as I just said. So only 6 years after the alliance effort was destroyed with the airplane and destroyed with this building coming down is when 9/11 takes place.
Yeah, 6.
And you might not have ever thought about this before, but the Pentagon was hit on the bottom floor. And the exact part of the Pentagon that was hit was the alliance's headquarters. Read this. This is off of New York Times. When hijacked American Airlines Flight 77 hit the Pentagon on September 11, 2001, it destroyed much of the Navy Command Center. It smashed directly into the office of the Chief of Naval Operations Intelligence Plot,
skeleton. That's the biggest
killing
problem.
7 Navy and civilian employees. That's right. The Chief of Naval Operations Intelligence. The Navy has been the key force doing this alliance. The Air Force has cooperated as well. But think about the scope of this, because there was also an investigation so the alliance was conducting its investigation to try to bring down the cabal. That's what the whole hanging Chad thing was about. George W. gets elected into office not by popular vote, but by a Supreme Court vote, which wasn't even correct because the other hanging Chads were actually in favor of Gore. Now, I'm not saying that Gore would have been much better than Bush. It's sort of like, which type of torture do you want, you know? But the point is, it was still, yeah, thank you. It was still a coup, and it was still really shady. So what happens is, the alliance was diligently working to bring down the Bush administration. The headquarters, again, Naval Operations Intelligence, the chief was running this thing. He gets blown up, all his people get blown up, and all of the financial investigations that they were doing into the cabal and what it was up to, all those documents were in, guess what? The World Trade Center. So they blew up the World Trade Center, brought it down into its own footprint, just like they had 6 years before, Oklahoma City, same situation. So this was a precision-targeted attack against the alliance. They never gave up, though. They kept working behind the scenes. They already had surveillance in place in the White House prior to 9/11. They have footage of these guys planning 9/11. That video will come out as this whole process, yes. So they really amp up, and this whole time we're hearing about these heavy-duty plans for mass arrests. They're really serious about it. I'm getting this documentation on all this by the year 2009 from Pete Peterson, and it's a very stunning story that most of you have been with me through this. It's been many years now, but boy, oh boy, is it not getting exciting. I mean, there's so much getting ready to happen. Wow. So around this time is when I start to get inside information that reveals a much deeper story of why this alliance effort matters so much. As you've heard me say before, in 2003, I meet this guy, Daniel. And he claimed that he worked on a project where they reverse engineered a seat from a UFO, and they could get trained psychics to sit in the chair, think about a particular place, and then a portal would open up, and if you pushed somebody through that portal, it would take them to that place. And it worked for space and time, so it was a time machine. Now, I interviewed this guy for years, and he never, ever stumbled and gave me all this information, including the fact that there is an ancient Stargate network all over the universe and all over our galaxy, of which each planet has one gate, and they had deciphered the coding of the gate system and used that basic knowledge to build the IP address system that we now use for the internet. So when DARPA designed the internet, they did it in homage to the same codes that they use, more or less similar codes, in the Stargate system. Really fascinating. So then 2007 is when Henry Deacon pops up on the scene with Project Camelot. This is the first time that I get introduced to somebody who's claiming that he's working in a base on Mars. And I traded information with Project Camelot about Daniel to get access to Henry Deacon, and I spoke to him for a total of over 80 hours on the phone. And we got into so much depth where he would go to work at a typical military
So
base in the
what
UK.
what?
He'd go through this machine called the corridor, and then on the other side, he'd end up on Mars, and he'd take a sub-shuttle bullet train type of thing to get to his office. And he was responsible for repairing advanced technology. He saw many, many different types of extraterrestrials. He estimated, I forget exactly how many, I think he said 200 different types of extraterrestrials that he had seen, many of whom he had meetings with, and he said that there was 260,000 personnel working at the base that he was at on Mars, and only 10,000 of them were born on Earth. It's stunning, stunning information. And we're peaceful with these beings. We're engaged in trade. Extraterrestrials are already a part of our lives, and he was working in this very, very classified program that hardly anybody has access to. So then 2 years later, I meet Emery Smith, and now you guys get to meet him. By this point, I'm already talking to Deacon. I'm already aware that they are autopsying beings, because obviously some of these beings die, but I had no idea how many. I had no idea, as Emery tells me, that there's 3,000 different specimens that he took. It's unbelievable, the scope of this thing, okay? So Emery gave me all this information about exobiology. We've heard that throughout this weekend, and I didn't think he would ever come forward. And he lost it. I mean, he burst into tears telling me his story, and it was incredibly compelling. During this exact same time window, 2009, Pete Peterson suddenly popped up. He gave Carrie Cassidy an interview. She sends me this WAV file of it recorded, or it was an MP3, and I listened to it, and I said, we got to get this guy right now. So I paid for the flight, I paid for the hotel, I paid for the rental car. We flew out to where he was. We stayed in a hotel nearby. It was a beautiful country area. And right that time is when we got the Pete Peterson interview captured on videotape. And it was stunning, because he continued to talk to me after this, and he revealed that there was a huge plan in place for this alliance to break down the cabal, and they wanted to tell us everything that's going on. They wanted to give us the whole truth. And this is where I first heard about the plan for mass arrests. They want to grab a whole bunch of these people all at the same time. But you look at the murderous opposition. You look at Eisenhower trying to invade Area 51, and they just give him a little taste and say, now get out of here. You look at Kennedy trying to bring him down. They blow his brains out. You look at, they try to bring down Nixon. He resigns. They never got to do the whole thing. He just said, oh, I'm out of here. You know? Then you look at what happens with Reagan. He's trying to tell us the truth about UFOs. They try to shoot him, and the only thing he can do a year later is talk to Spielberg. Then you look at what happens with Iran-Contra. We get revealed that our government is trading with our terrorists and doing the cocaine business, right? Ollie North was running the cocaine business. Then you find out that the people who were actually running the cocaine business run for president and win as the Clintons. And then somebody tries to arrest them, top military coup, and those poor guys get shot down in a plane, and before anybody has time to investigate, out comes Oklahoma City, which conveniently destroys all the documents in the Whitewater investigation. Then 6 years later, they pulled it off again. Head of Naval Operations. They shoot a missile, which they said was a plane, right into his office in the Pentagon. Blow his ass up. And then take down the towers where they had these documents that they were doing for the investigation. So the alliance is really pissed, obviously, because this group has been controlling the press. You can't just come out with this stuff. You can't just tell people what's going on. You're going to get killed. And there's been many, many of these types of things. We only get to know some of these people. Around this same time, just a few months later after I meet Pete Peterson, I'm at a Project Camelot event, and I meet Jacob. And Jacob was this guy, as I've said before, working for the Rothschilds at a very high level, and he was acting as a whistleblower, telling me he didn't want to go along with this anymore, and he wanted the truth to be known. So that's when I start to find out the awesome scope of this secret space program that we have bases all over our solar system, all over the galaxy, that we're in contact with many, many different extraterrestrial races, and they're engaged in trade. And in certain cases, Jacob had to assassinate extraterrestrials who had reneged on a business deal. And that was why he was so highly valued. That was one of his skills. He had to load an alternative personality with an accent and everything else. And he told me you couldn't get guns through these
Guardians
portals.
of the Galaxy.
So the typical favored method that he would use
that
is
makes
it would
all
appear that
sense
he
why
was giving
he's
them
like
a gift
that.
of a potted plant.
We're all different.
But then the plant is actually got a knife blade in the bottom of it, and he'd pull the blade out and stab this being. So he literally was doing that kind of stuff. Interestingly enough, I first did get contacted by Corey Goode back in this same year of 2009, but at the time he only told me a relatively benign amount of information about what he was doing. So it wasn't until he came out in 2014 and gave me this information about the secret space program that all the pieces were filled in, pieces I didn't have before. We learn about this race called the Draco, which was clearly being portrayed in the movie Jupiter Ascending. They don't really look like this, okay, with the wings and everything, but it's not that far different either. Same guys that did The Matrix made this movie. And you see that these reptilians clearly are working directly with some sort of secret government force. They're very menacing, they're very upsetting. And again, this is not exactly what they look like, but it isn't a whole heck of a lot different either. And so, see this face, and then this is what Corey is saying it actually looks like. So not a whole heck of a lot different. And there's a subservient race they have known as the Reptoids, and they look like this. And so you can see this is some pretty disturbing stuff. The German aspect, the Nazi aspect, is helping the Draco. That's called the Dark Fleet. They wear these kind of uniforms. It was very fascinating. When I had Whitley Strieber on my panel at Conscious Life Expo last year, and he reported, remembering in his abduction experience, people that were human with black uniforms involved in his abduction. So Whitley Strieber was probably contacted by the Dark Fleet, didn't even realize that this is what was really going on. So the 5 factions of the space program, Solar Warden appears to be the one that Henry Deacon was in. It's the guardian of our solar system, protects our air traffic. Then you have the ICC, or Interplanetary Corporate Conglomerate. That's a group of the corporations, the defense contractors, that broke away and said, we're going to do our own thing. And they even broke away from the rest of the space program. They have some interaction with it, but not a whole lot. Then you have Global Galactic League of Nations, which was the kind of apologetic cookie thrown to the world leaders, where they get to go to one planet, they have one base, and they're told that's an outpost to defend against extraterrestrial invasion. So they get some cool stuff, but they really have no idea what's going on. You have a military faction that provides security and logistics for the other factions. Then you have the Dark Fleet, as I just said. And there's also certain small groups called scout groups. So some of the overview here, there's over 100 colonies that they've built just in our solar system. They're mining, and then they have living quarters near the mines. They take the mined material and they go to these massive manufacturing plants. And let's just try to skip ahead a little bit here, because I am getting the warning here, so that we can talk about these
which is horrible.
Factions.
Windows better.
He gives me the whole story between October 2014 and February 2015. And on February 27th, the Blue Avians, this group that nobody had ever seen before, asks for Corey by name. It's pretty amazing.
Blue Avians.
And so on March 1st, he was actually taken up and transported to the Lunar Operations Command in this craft, which is what he calls a DART. 2 seats in the front and 3 in the back. And then he got into a room. This isn't exactly what it looks like. This is kind of an artistic interpretation, but it was a conference room in which these beings appeared behind him as he's meeting in front of this Secret Space Program Alliance. And the Secret Space Program Alliance is telling him they want to release all of their technology to humanity. They do not want this to be kept a secret anymore. Give them a big round of applause, everybody. It's fantastic. Now, they have been heavily attacked by other parts of the Secret Space Program. They have not been able to get their goals reached, which is really sad. But then, as a result of Corey and what happened, we hear about the Sphere Being Alliance. Now, this is also some very fascinating stuff, because beginning in the late 1990s, all these giant spheres started coming into our solar system. So this is from June 2nd, 1998, and in this animation you see these two gigantic planet-sized objects crash into the sun, and then a huge plume of solar radiation coming out, which NASA said was unrelated.
Wow.
Okay? But the size of those objects are literally planet-sized. Another really cool one is July 31st, 2002.
Wow.
And you see right here
that means
that
the
on the
pyramid I
left you
saw
have
was
Mars,
actually
and on the
working.
right is this sun cruiser.
So I saw a pyramid
Don't
with
worry about
a
the
blue
straight lines on the
beam,
sides. That's just
what seemed to be a blue
it's
beam
blowing out the
on the
camera
apex going
with its
up into
brightness.
the atmosphere
The very
of the
next
sky.
day, August 1st,
And then I
2002,
woke up.
the sun cruiser has disappeared.
Wow.
The planet-sized object
That's so
just
awesome.
took off. And there it is the day before.
So that
and then
means
there it is,
I
it's
can
gone.
remote view
Mars
from
hasn't moved.
Alaska.
There it is again.
Yeah, but I'd rather be
And it
there.
disappeared.
I'd rather just buy the fucking
So Corey
tickets
was
than be
told
there.
that these sphere beings
Yeah.
were being here to protect us from the sun going off and giving a big solar flash before we're ready. And this is a big subject for my Ascension talks. They also used these spheres to transport him to the Lunar Operations Command, and he was able to see these spheres all over our solar system, buffering the energy coming out of the sun. So the blue avians are a really fascinating part of this because they appear to be the source of the law of one material, which I'd been a scholar of since 1996.
Yes, so that's
And I'm
like
probably
the
the world's
vision I
expert
had.
on it. I think everybody would agree with that. So they actually, thank you. So they came back and they gave us a personal visit, thanks to Corey. They also showed up with these golden triangle head beings, as they've been called. And these guys, again, showed up on the very first day. So that's a big part of this. Another huge part of the 5 alliance groups is the Inner Earth Alliance. Later on, Corey got to meet these beings that are apparently like what we would think of as Pleiadians or Nordics, traveling in these traditional flying saucers like the Billy Meyer and Semjazi story. That apparently is these Nordic extraterrestrials coming from inside the Earth.
Yeah, just like that.
And they are also working very diligently to try to bring us the truth. And so this is some of their under-Earth areas. This is Corey's artistic renditions of what they look like, a certain group. And this is the Priestess Kari that we've heard so much about. Various other groups illustrated here, some of which look Asian and have darker colored skin.
Hey. That's so fucking awesome. I had so many visions of this. And I actually projected to that fucking room over there. Wow. Yeah, but I saw butterflies. I did like a meditation with the neurophone, and I saw like these butterfly type organisms that had their third eye opened. It was like a dot, like a kunkum, but like an eye. It was an eye right here, and then they will fly. It was like I would say a butterfly, but it was fatter, and they were flying. At least that's what I saw.
Some of which look like they're from Africa. And it turns out that these people are, in fact, coming from our future, Earth's future, and they are very interestingly involved. So the second to last group here, because I am being kicked off the stage and I don't want to be disrespectful to the next speaker, the next group is the Military Industrial Complex Secret Space Program. And so this group is working within the lower level space program where they don't have access to the deeper levels. And this group was built to be a fall guy, where they revealed that they have some space platforms and they have ships that can travel our solar system. But then they're going to tell us there's only 1 or 2 ETs, if any, and there's nothing really to know out there. So Corey was abducted by these folks. He was interrogated and put through torture and outed people in the Secret Space Program Alliance. And then this is also where we found out about that they now have in the Military Industrial Complex group these triangle-shaped craft that are very advanced, and they've been shooting down the Draco as the Draco have been trying to escape our planet. So that's what these Draco craft look like with the extended teardrops. And here's the triangle craft. So let's give them a big round of applause for doing their part. Most likely, this is what we're going to hear about first. They're triangles. We're not going to hear about the Draco right away. The last group that I wanted to get to before we were out of time here, which I basically already am, but, you know, it's just a lunch break, so a little bit of flexibility is okay, is the Olmecs. So after Corey had been brought up there, he was introduced to this man who identified himself as Mika. And Mika said that he was part of a group that he was the equivalent of Corey Goode on his planet, where he was the first person that had been contacted by the Blue Avians again, and his planet, like ours, had been enslaved by the Draco. The Draco always do this behind the scenes. There's laws of free will where they can't openly appear. They have to contact people who think of themselves as elites, get them to form a cult like the Illuminati, get them to control and dominate the planet while working behind the scenes, and giving them a secret space program that the people don't know about. And that becomes a breakaway civilization. Mika's people are fascinated by our music. They have 70s music on playlists that they listen to, believe it or not. I don't blame them. It's great. It's a great era.
Yeah.
And they did at one time come here and land in Mesoamerica, and they were extraterrestrials, and they built these huge heads of themselves, which again look like people of African descent, but somehow they end up in Mesoamerica. Well, that's the same group. That's Mika's group. So they did come here for a while, and they built a lot of these giant heads, as you can see here. It was a fascinating series of archaeological discoveries that were made.
I always had that.
And they are essentially working to help us get through this transitional phase.
Philosophy of the future.
So yeah, let's give them a big round of applause.
So good. Even my heart, I feel my heart going like
all of these different groups are working together, and they're all working to try to bring us into a common understanding, a common sense of what's really going on and where we need to go as a planet. When the truth comes out, we are going to get such an incredible, incredible piece of information dropped on us, and that's where I'd like to, again, if you didn't hear it yesterday, I want to go through this again 2 days ago, where the President of the United States teased that there's going to be a sixth branch of the U.S. military called the Space Force.
Space Force, yeah.
This is incredible stuff. 6 weeks after Trump told a crowd of U.S. Marines at Miramar Air Station, he's at it again, teasing the idea of a Space Force. And this was done while he's giving a trophy to the Army football team. And he says to them, "You will be part of the 5 proud branches of the U.S. Armed Forces, Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, and Coast Guard. We're actually thinking of a 6th military branch, and that would be the Space Force." Does that make sense?
It makes sense, yeah, even more. But, okay, what he did, he said he made some changes to businesses, and then he said, they were taking a picture, and then he said, hopefully this is something for generations to come. And he was with his children, I think it was. You can Google that and look it up on YouTube.
It's happening. Because we are getting very big in space, both militarily and for other reasons. This is the MIC part getting ready to come out about the flying triangles. And we are seriously thinking of the Space Force. And then you can see, here he is, you know, Space Force could be number 6, it's right on CNN. And I want you to look again closely at these guys behind him.
Yeah.
Because they can't stop laughing. They don't think this is true. They're not on a need-to-know basis. And so back in March, he said, we're going to lead again. You see what's happening, rockets going up left and right. You haven't seen that in a long time. Very soon, we're going to Mars. And you wouldn't have been going if my opponent won, that I can tell you.
Oh, come on. I'm pretty correct, so let's go.
You.
They're going to Mars. I fucking knew that.
My new national strategy recognizes space as a warfighting domain. We may even have a space force. Then he goes, well, no, we will have a space force. And we have the Army, the Navy. I was saying that the other day. Maybe we need a new force. We'll call it the Space Force. That could happen. That could be the big breaking story. He knows already. This is getting ready to happen. That's why it kind of drives me crazy in a sense that we're doing this conference and it hasn't quite happened yet. All 5 of these alliance groups getting ready to break the news. And then we had, as I said, this is definitely worth repeating in case you missed my other talk, QAnon, which again, this was, yes. In case you don't know, there's an anonymous chat forum called 4chan, and on 4chan, what clearly seemed to be the President of the United States and his top military people begin posting anonymously as Q. They gave you tons and tons of clues that it was the Trump administration. They didn't even hide it. And what they're doing also is taking pictures from inside Air Force One and giving you information leaks before it comes out. They teased that something was about to happen, and then Saudi Arabia has this whole thing go down with the mass arrests there. That's a big precursor to what's going to happen here, by the way. Totally amazing. What I want to end on is, yes, May 10th, just not too long ago, at the bottom of this passage, they say Sky Event. And that seems to be linked to this, which was the picture they posted. To be linked to this, which was the picture they posted.
This is not about a single person. This is not about fame, followers, or profiteering. Okay? We the people. We the people. We the people. There will come a time they will not be safe walking down the street. We will not be held hostage. Sky Event. I hope they don't use the fucking lasers and start killing people. But you never know.
And that seems to be linked to this, which was the picture they posted of this weird hotel that has a ship on top of it. Marina Bay Sands Hotel in Singapore. Look at this thing. You can see it almost looks like a cigar-shaped aircraft, just like what we hear about in Solar Warden. You can see people can hang out up there, have drinks. And so do you think maybe this was intended to suggest a ship flying in the sky? And I've talked about how we're now up to 30,000 sealed indictments. And you can see that right here. Through April 30th, the last time it was listed, 28,937 sealed indictments, guys. And there it is right there. This is unbelievable. So the last big step is going to have to be a horrific economic collapse like 2008. And people have been asking me, what do you do with your investments? I tell you, I'm saying if you want to sell now, that might be a good idea. But if this happens and you're still holding on to stuff, do not sell as it's crashing. Hold on, because the Alliance apparently is going to redo the financial system. So we are so close to the edge here. We are so close to this amazing transformation. All this stuff is getting ready to happen for us. And it is so incredibly exciting to me, because here we are living in this conscious geometric universe, right? I'm going to be talking about that on Monday. Don't miss my Monday talk. And also, in case you didn't hear this, Emery Smith is coming on around 1 o'clock, 1:15, and I'm going to be on stage with him as well on Monday. I'm doing double duty on Monday, 6 hours, back to back. Yes. I kind of got volunteered into this, sort of like the Alliance does, you know? So we're going to be talking about all of his background in the secret space program. When I do my thing, I'm going to be giving you the scientific proof of ascension, including the recent solar flash that happened on our closest neighbor, predating what's going to happen with us. So there's such a big story going on here. And these 5 Alliance groups are working to give us the truth. They're working to bring real disclosure to humanity. And that is so exciting for me. It's an incredible, incredible opportunity that we all have, because this is real. You look at what they're doing, you look at these 5 groups, and you look at where this is going, it is absolutely stunning. One last thing I do want to say. My website is divinecosmos.com, and coming up at the end of July, I have an all-weekend, 17-hour event that's going to be the grand download of all the things I have to tell you guys about the science, about ascension, about the secret space program, insider testimony, so much more than I can compress into this little 90-minute talk today. So please, if you want to, go check that out. And this is all time I have. They're yanking me off the stage. 5 Alliance groups. Contact in the desert, everybody. One of them is straight and one of them goes in steps. Big frickin' deal.
That's so awesome, man. Hey, you look like a palladium. Oh, those blue eyes. You know, the blue eyes that I saw in my vision from that female are just like that. I think you're probably palladium reincarnation, most likely. Who knows? Really? Finally? Part 2 disclosure in game. I get the feeling that things are gonna get better, but it's most likely a simulation. Yeah, it wouldn't make any other sense to me. Let's close the fucking screen.
Oh, look at it later. Minecraft. Alright, alright, thank you for watching, guys. See you later. If you and stopping the stream. Alright, giggity.